The text message notification popped up on a Thursday afternoon, a quiet moment in the late afternoon while I was wrapping up a quarterly strategy call. I was sitting in my corner office in Austin, the one with the panoramic view of the downtown skyline, but my world suddenly felt very small as I looked at the glowing screen in my hand. Honey, the engagement party is going to be for family and their immediate circle only. The Harrisons are very traditional about these things, you know. We just think it would be for the best if you didn't attend this one. We don't want any awkward conversations or questions that might make everyone feel uncomfortable. You understand, don't you, Maya? That was the message from my mother. A moment later, a notification from my father appeared. A single red heart emoji. No text, just a silent, passive approval of her decision. I just stared at the words for what felt like a long time. That familiar ache blooming in my chest, that old feeling of being pushed to the side. I typed a single word back, understood, and that was it. My name is Maya Sterling, by the way, and for my entire life I have been the older sister they preferred to keep in the shadows. The very next morning, Thomas Harrison, the man whose family name was synonymous with half the premium insurance policies across the United States, walked into my office lobby with his entire executive team for a long scheduled partnership meeting. 1 hour after that meeting ended, the lavish charity engagement gala was abruptly canceled. There was no explanation given to the hundreds of guests who had already sent in their RSVPs. No postponement, no new date. It was simply erased from the social calendar. If you have ever been made to feel, whether through direct words or a deafening silence, that you aren't quite polished enough to stand beside your own family during their proudest moments, if you have ever been quietly disinvited to protect an image that you were never a part of, then leave a comment below. Let me know I am not the only one who has gone through this. Share your own experience, no matter how small it might have seemed at the time. There is strength in knowing you aren't alone. Go ahead and hit that like button if any of this hits home for you. Subscribe for more stories about the messy, complicated truth of family dynamics, and make sure you turn on notifications because I promise you, you will want to see how this story ends. The following morning, I was in my office with David Miller, the only person at my company who had any real insight into the complicated mess of my family. We were going over the final preparations for the huge meeting with Summit Mutual Insurance. Spreadsheets covered the conference table, along with detailed projections and carefully crafted demo scripts. Everything had to be absolutely perfect. This potential partnership was the key to taking my company, Apex Analytics, to an entirely new level. Integrating our predictive risk platform into the systems of one of the industry giants would be a total game changer. David looked up from his tablet, his brow furrowed slightly. He noticed I was unusually quiet, my gaze lost somewhere in the city view beyond the glass. He'd seen that look on my face before, the one that meant something personal was weighing me down. "Is everything all right, Maya?" he asked, his voice low and casual. It was his way of checking in without being pushy. I gave a slight shake of my head, putting on a mask of professional neutrality. Just some family drama. Nothing new. Let's stay focused on the pitch. We can't have any distractions today, not with this much on the line. He didn't press me for more, and that is exactly why I valued him so much. He had an instinct for when to offer support and when to give space. David had been with me almost from the very beginning, one of my first key hires when Apex was nothing more than an ambitious idea operating out of a cramped, rented co-working space. He had watched it grow into the powerhouse it had become, and he understood that my personal life was kept in a separate, tightly sealed container for very good reasons. As we waited for the Summit Mutual team to be brought up, my thoughts, despite my best efforts to keep them in check, drifted back to my childhood in Columbus, Ohio. That city and that house had shaped my understanding of family through a mix of subtle and obvious favoritism. One particular evening stood out in my memory, a huge backyard barbecue my parents had thrown to celebrate my dad's promotion at his firm. They had invited everyone they considered important in their social circle, including colleagues, neighbors from their perfect upscale suburb, and even a few influential families connected to local charities and country clubs. My brother, Caleb, was 16 at the time, already showing the kind of effortless charm that naturally drew people to him. He moved through the crowd, shaking hands with the adults with easy confidence, telling jokes that made them laugh and charming the other teenagers until they were hanging on his every word. Throughout the evening, guests would pull my parents aside, their voices buzzing with admiration. "That son of yours is going places, I tell you. He has that special something." Or, "What a remarkable future he has ahead of him." My mother and father soaked it all up, their faces glowing with pride as they skillfully guided every conversation back to Caleb's latest wins, his leading role on the debate team, his leadership positions in school clubs, and how he was already getting offers for prestigious business internships. I, meanwhile, was tucked away on a patio chair with my laptop on my knees. I was deep in code, working on a personal project, which was an early version of an algorithm designed to find hidden patterns in large data sets. It wasn't for a class, it was just something that fascinated me, a way of finding logic and order in a chaotic world. My mother eventually noticed me and walked over, her hand closing around my arm to pull me into the middle of a group of her friends from the local garden club. "This is my daughter, Maya," she announced, her smile bright but not quite reaching her eyes. She always has her head buried in that computer. Not quite the social butterfly her brother is, but she gets good grades, I suppose. The women offered polite, distant nods, saying things like, "Oh, that's lovely, dear," before immediately turning the conversation right back to Caleb, asking about his latest award or his big plans for the future. It wasn't openly mean, but it was completely dismissive. It was a clear, unspoken signal of where their pride and their priorities really were. Over the years, that scene happened again and again at holiday dinners, school events, and even casual hangouts with family. Caleb's talent for networking and his charm were always praised and seen as the only way to be successful. My deep passion for technology, for building complex systems that solved real problems, was treated like a weird, nerdy hobby. It was something that didn't fit their idea of what a successful life looked like. My dad would often make comments about how people skills are what really open doors in this world, implying that my path was less stable and less impressive. I eventually gave up trying to share my own wins. The awards from national coding competitions and the early acceptance letter to a top engineering program were met with quick, polite nods before the conversation went right back to Caleb. David's voice pulled me out of my memories. He slid the final printed presentation deck across the table, its pages crisp and perfectly organized. "Here is the updated version with the new projections. You are going to crush this, Maya. I mean it. You are the best CEO I have ever worked for. The way you see opportunities that no one else can even find, that is the reason we are all here today." His genuine words felt like a relief, cutting through the cold feeling of my memories. I managed to give him a real smile, the first one that morning. "Thanks, David. That means a lot, especially coming from you. Let's run through the key slides one last time." We dove back into our practice, working on the transitions between sections and fine-tuning our answers to questions about timelines and security. David acted like a skeptical executive, throwing tough questions at me. I answered each one with clear, data-driven confidence. By the time we finished, I felt ready. This office and this company were my territory. This was the world I had built from nothing, and I was surrounded by people who valued me for who I was. David looked at his watch and stood up. "They should be here any minute. You ready?" I took a deep breath and smoothed my clothes. "Absolutely. Let's go show them what we have built. I have never told anyone in my family what exactly I have truly built." It all started during my senior year of college with my thesis project. I was majoring in computer science and statistics at a state university, and I became obsessed with how traditional insurance models were still relying on outdated math. These models were too slow and unable to adapt to the fast-moving variables of the real world. Flood patterns were shifting because of the climate. Sophisticated fraud schemes were spreading online, and as a result, insurance companies were losing money because their risk assessments were always reacting to the past, not predicting the future. Late at night, working in the campus library or in my tiny dorm room, I began to write the initial code for what would eventually become the core of Apex Analytics. It wasn't glamorous work, just endless lines of code designed to pull in public data, weather information, and historical claims data to run complex simulations to find patterns that were invisible to most people. By the time I defended my thesis, the prototype was already showing amazing results. It could flag potential high-loss events weeks or even months before standard industry methods. After graduating, I didn't take a regular corporate job like my friends. Instead, I researched and emailed a handful of small, regional insurance firms, offering to run a free pilot program in exchange for access to their real-world data. 2 of them took a chance on me. Within a few months, one of those firms reported a huge drop in unexpected payouts on their auto insurance policies. The other managed to reduce their fraud-related losses in home insurance by a massive margin. Those first wins gave me the proof I needed. The first round of real funding came from a local investor who had heard about my success through industry talk. It wasn't a huge amount, just enough to rent a small office in downtown Austin and hire 2 part-time developers. From there, we kept improving the platform, adding machine learning that could learn from new claims in real time. We started targeting mid-sized companies, and our growth took off. A major investment round led by a big venture capital firm gave us the money to expand our team and build high-level security features. Our client list grew as word of our results spread. Our system didn't just predict risk, it helped set prices and suggested ways to save millions of dollars. Each new milestone felt like a personal victory, but I kept it all to myself. The late-night coding, the big board meetings, the pitches, that was my world here in Austin. The company had finally reached a point where the numbers did all the talking. Apex Analytics was now solid and profitable, and I never had to ask for anyone's permission to make my own choices. The difference made my rare visits back home even harder. Those quick trips to Columbus, maybe once or twice a year for a holiday, always followed the same script. I would park my modest car in the driveway of my parents' big suburban house, dressed in simple jeans and a blouse, careful not to look too flashy. The conversations would always be about Caleb, how great he was doing, the important people he knew, and his engagement to Madeline Harrison, the daughter of one of the most powerful families in the insurance world. My mother and father would just glow as they talked about the exclusive invitations they had received, the fancy places for the gala, and how proud they were. They would talk about Caleb's latest promotion and then turn to me with a pitying sigh and say something like, "We are just so glad you are settled and doing okay for yourself." They never asked for details about my work. There were no questions about my projects or the international travel I did for conferences. It was as if tech stuff was too boring for them to care about. I would give vague answers like things are steady and quickly change the subject. Meanwhile, my reality in Austin was a penthouse apartment overlooking the river with floor-to-ceiling windows. I had a home office where I could work whenever I wanted. My team looked to me for leadership and trusted my vision. My success had given me total freedom. I kept these 2 worlds separate because my early tries to bridge the gap only led to disappointment. My efforts to explain my work were met with polite but blank stares, followed by quick turns back to Caleb's future. Over time, it just wasn't worth the effort. They had their own picture of who I was, and that picture didn't have room for the person who had built something huge from nothing. Silence became my shield. I let them have their version of me. I had mine, and mine was more than enough. At exactly 10 a.m., my assistant's voice came through the intercom telling me that the team from Summit Mutual Insurance had arrived in the lobby. I stood up, straightened my blazer, and went out to meet them myself. It was something I had done since the beginning. Meeting partners at the door felt more personal. Thomas Harrison entered first, his presence filling the room without even trying. He had the kind of quiet authority that comes from running a multi-billion-dollar empire for decades. His wife, Victoria, walked beside him, looking elegant and composed in a classic dress, offering a warm but careful smile. Madeline followed them, dressed in expensive designer clothes that showed her family's wealth. Her gaze swept over our modern lobby with a look of judgment before it finally landed on me. Caleb brought up the rear, explaining casually that he was there to watch this major deal as part of his involvement in the family's future business. Not one of them showed even a hint of recognition. To them, I was just the CEO they had researched, the person behind the revolutionary platform they hoped would change their business. Mr. Harrison? Mrs. Harrison, welcome to Apex Analytics, I said, shaking hands with a professional smile. It is a pleasure to finally meet you all in person. Thomas shook my hand firmly, his eyes sharp. Miss Sterling, the pleasure is all ours. Your company's reputation is impressive. We have been very interested in everything we have read so far. I nodded toward the others. Madeline, Caleb, thank you for joining us. Please follow me to the conference room. I led the group through our office, past engineers working at whiteboards and data analysts busy with their models. The space was meant to feel modern and forward-thinking, with lots of natural light and a feeling of focused energy. A few of my team members looked up but quickly went back to work. In the conference room, David and the rest of my leadership team were already seated. I made quick introductions before inviting everyone to sit down. Once everyone was settled, I started the presentation. We are excited to show how Apex can fit perfectly into Summit Mutual's current systems, I began, clicking to the first slide. The live demo was the main part of the meeting. I showed them sophisticated simulations. In one scenario, we modeled hurricane risks along the coast, using real-time weather data and history to predict losses with a level of detail that made old systems look like toys. Another demo showed our fraud detection, instantly flagging patterns that old filters would miss. Thomas Harrison leaned forward, clearly interested. He started asking tough questions about our accuracy, data privacy, and how the platform could grow. His questions were smart, showing he knew the industry inside and out. Victoria listened closely, taking notes. Madeline watched from her seat, looking polite but a bit superior, as if she were measuring everything against her own high standards. Caleb tried to jump in a couple of times with general comments about the customer experience, but his remarks were shallow and lacked technical depth, so the conversation quickly moved on. The room stayed focused. We talked about money, savings, and how to start the project. My team handled the technical parts perfectly. By the time we finished the main presentation, the energy in the room was great. Thomas was clearly impressed, looking at his executives in a way that signaled he wanted to do the deal. Everyone in the room seemed to agree on the huge value Apex could provide. For that hour, the room belonged to the numbers and the future. As the formal presentation ended and we moved into a QA session, I casually mentioned, I have to admit, things have been a bit busy lately with all the preparations for my brother's upcoming engagement party. Thomas Harrison's head snapped up from his notes, his eyes, sharp and intense, locked onto mine. The entire room went completely silent. I met his gaze without flinching and added, I am Caleb's older sister. A heavy, suffocating silence filled the room. Madeline's face went pale, her composure finally breaking. Caleb stammered, Maya? The name was a whisper, as if he couldn't believe what was happening. Victoria put a hand to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. Thomas was the first to speak. His voice was low but strong. Miss Sterling. Maya. Is it true that your own family sent you messages asking you not to come to the party to avoid causing any discomfort in front of us? I didn't say anything. Instead, I unlocked my phone, opened the message from my mother, and slid it across the table toward him. He picked it up and started reading. The longer he scrolled, the darker his expression became. His jaw tightened, and he looked deeply disappointed. When he finally handed the phone back to me, his voice was measured but firm. "I have spent months studying your work, Maya. Your platform is brilliant. It is exactly what our industry needs. I came to respect the mind behind Apex long before I walked in here today. To learn that the person I respect so much professionally has been treated this way by her own family, it is very troubling." Madeline stared at the table, refusing to look at anyone, her face showing her deep discomfort. Caleb shifted in his seat, trying to find an answer. "It wasn't supposed to be like that," he stammered, his voice shaking. "They just didn't want things to be awkward. We didn't know." His explanation sounded weak and empty. The tension in the room was thick. My own team looked confused, sensing the drama, but not knowing the whole story. David stayed calm beside me, but I could feel his support. Thomas leaned back in his chair, folding his hands. "We came here today to partner with a visionary leader. Instead, we find ourselves sitting across from someone whose own family felt it was necessary to hide her from us just to protect their own image." Victoria reached out and touched her husband's arm, her face showing the same unease. Madeline finally looked up, her cheeks bright red with embarrassment, but she quickly looked away again. Caleb tried one more time, his voice desperate. "Thomas, sir, it's not what it looks like. My parents just—" Thomas raised a hand, a simple gesture that cut him off. The silence in the room got even deeper. I sat calmly, allowing the moment to happen without saying anything else. This wasn't about revenge. It was just about the truth. Thomas looked at me, his expression searching, as if he were reevaluating everything. The professional atmosphere we had built was gone, replaced by something personal and unavoidable. Thomas stayed quiet for a long time, thinking about what he had read. Then he straightened up and turned to his executives. "The business value of this partnership is clear," he said. "We are moving forward with the deal, today." My team looked relieved. The contracts were brought out and pens moved quickly. Once the business was done, Thomas cleared his throat. "Madeline, Caleb, could I have a private word with you both?" He pointed to a corner of the room. Victoria joined them. The rest of us stayed in our seats. I watched the four of them talk. Thomas spoke first, and I caught words like respect and values. Caleb was talking fast, using his hands, trying to explain himself. Madeline stood there with tears in her eyes. Thomas just shook his head slowly. He then spoke to his daughter, his voice steady but full of regret. He said family should mean more than social appearances, and he couldn't welcome her into a family dynamic that would treat someone as successful as I was that way. At that, Madeline started crying. She begged him to change his mind, talking about all the plans they had made. Caleb joined in, promising things would change. Victoria spoke softly but firmly to Madeline, saying that some principles are more important than plans. Thomas did not change his mind. Finally, he pulled out his phone. He made a short call to the event planner. "Cancel it. Cancel everything. Give everyone their money back. No explanation needed besides unforeseen circumstances." Madeline let out a sob and turned away. Caleb just stood there, looking like the world had ended. They grabbed their things in silence and walked out. I stayed in my seat and nodded to Thomas as he came back to the table. "Thank you for the decision on the partnership," I said. "The business merits are clear." He looked at me with respect and a bit of frustration at the situation. The meeting ended soon after. That evening, my phone started blowing up with calls from my mother. I let them go to voicemail. When I finally answered, she was panicking. "Maya, what happened? Thomas Harrison canceled everything. The party, the engagement, all of it. Caleb is a wreck. How could you let this happen?" I stayed quiet. She kept talking, moving between being angry and being sad. "We are flying to Austin tomorrow. Your father and I will be there. We need to fix this as a family." She hung up before I could say anything. My parents showed up at my office the next day. I had them shown to a small meeting room. They looked tired and anxious. My mother spoke first, her voice full of rage. "Maya, how could you do this to your brother? You destroyed his future over something so small. My father tried to be nicer. "Sweetheart, we are so sorry if the messages hurt you. We were just trying to avoid awkwardness. We thought you would understand. It was for the good of the family. Caleb worked so hard for this." My mother jumped in again. "And now Thomas Harrison thinks we are monsters. Do you know how embarrassing this is for us?" I listened to it all. When they stopped, I spoke calmly. "You didn't hide me to help me. You did it to protect your image. And when the truth came out, there were consequences. Those came from your choices, not mine." My father shifted in his chair. "We can fix this. Just talk to Thomas. Explain it was a mistake. They respect you now. Use that to help Caleb." My mother nodded. "Exactly. He is your brother. Family sticks together." I just shook my head. I am done with these part-time relationships where I am only family when it helps you. You made your priorities clear for years. This is the result. They kept arguing, but I didn't move. Eventually, they left. The next day, Caleb and my sister Chloe arrived. I met them in the same room. Caleb looked like he hadn't slept. Chloe looked angry. Caleb started begging. "Maya, please, you have to help. Madeline is heartbroken. Her parents won't talk to me. Everything is gone because of one meeting. I know the messages were wrong, but please, just call Thomas. Save my life." Chloe snapped at me. "You are being so selfish, Maya. You blew up a small thing into a disaster. Caleb doesn't deserve this because you have a grudge." Caleb nodded. "She's right. We're family." Chloe kept going. "You've always been too sensitive. You chose to make this explode." I let them finish. "This isn't about one text," I said. "This is about how you've treated me for decades. The outcome is yours to live with." Caleb started crying. Chloe glared at me. I stood up. "I have heard enough. Please leave." They finally walked out. The room felt clean. A few weeks later, an old friend from Columbus told me the news. The party was gone for good. The Harrisons had cut all ties with my family. Caleb was losing all his business opportunities. People were talking, questioning how a family could treat their own daughter that way, especially a successful CEO. My parents were losing their social status too. Longtime friends were pulling away. Chloe was facing awkward questions. Regret had set in back home, but it was too late. I had made a clean break. I got a new number and blocked everyone. One afternoon in Austin, I looked out at the skyline. I felt at peace. The weight of needing their approval was gone. This was my life. My success was about proving to myself that I could build something meaningful. I learned that family isn't always who you are born with. It's the people who see your worth. Cutting ties was hard, but it was freedom. I was moving forward with a team that felt like home. True independence is knowing your value doesn't depend on anyone else. Once you know that, nothing can take it away. End of story.